Well, welcome back. It is episode 2 of Coast to Coast, or week 2 of Coast to Coast. A huge weekend of rugby to talk about. The running order looks absolutely massive. But welcome back, Ella. How you doing?
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, no, I've caught up on all the games. I think the time difference kicked my butt, so to speak. Trying to watch games at 4 a.m. is just not for me. But so much to talk about. The world of rugby never fails to deliver. So I'm pretty excited to crack into it today.
Yeah, we had multiple finals, we had test matches, we had squad namings. Like, we literally had a bit of everything this weekend. It's been, as you say, super exciting. But I feel like we're recording this on Monday morning, my time. So what's that, Monday evening? So there's only one place to start, right? And that is Scott Robertson's first All Black squad. So as our resident Kiwi, you wanna take it away?
Wow. Yes, we're literally recording a matter of an hour and a half after the naming of the squad. Most important thing probably first, All Blacks captain, no surprises, it is Scott Barrett. I think his reputation amongst the international rugby community is maybe as a bit of a card magnet. Is that like kind of how he's thought of up your way?
I think it's fair to say, but I also think that's just like, that's if when people on social media sort of knee-jerk reactions, but I also think most of those people would admit he's pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so he is Razor's pick. I think people aren't that surprised because of that Crusaders connection. Ardie Savia is vice captain, but there's another vice captain, and that's Jordie Barrett. And we were talking about earlier, another record for the Barrett family. Undoubtedly, there'll be a game this year that Jordie captains. And so when that happens, and then obviously Scott captains, that will mean that all three of the Barrett brothers have led the All Blacks at some point in time. Just mind-blowing stuff.
That has to be a first, surely.
I would imagine so.
I can't
Three
think
brothers.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
What's the reaction like to how important do Kiwi fans think the captain is?
I think in the wake of maybe Sam Cane's captaincy being a little bit less popular, and that coming in the wake of Kieran Reid and then Richie McCaw, the shoes that are impossible to fill. I think it is a really important job. People always say that there are 3 very tough jobs in New Zealand. One's being the Prime Minister, but harder than that is being the All Blacks coach and the All Blacks captain. So it's important, I think. Mixed reactions. People were in the camp of Ardie Savia, but I think, it's been named now. Let's just get on with it. Big kind of thing from it, and I'd be interested to know what you think about this, given you watched the Super Rugby final. All anyone's been talking about this year, and probably player of the season, is Hoskins Sotutu. No room for Hoskins in Razor's squad. Is that surprising to you as someone who saw him play on the weekend?
Yeah, for sure. And also just surprising because you've heard so much hype throughout the year. It sounds like he's been playing amazing all year. You have to assume there's method in it, but it's a bold move not to pick probably the Form 8 in Super.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess in his place, we see the arrival of Wallace Satiti, who's kind of just appeared on the scene this year. He's 21, just outrageous, really, but untested for sure. Razor said in his interviews that after the naming, that he's looking for Lucy's in particular, who are good on both sides of the ball, which I think might be a bit of a subtle comment towards the Sotutu exclusion, and probably saying the carrying was great, but I need to see more on the other side. Other kind of notable things, we've got only 3 locks. Did that raise a few eyebrows for you?
Yes, I was frantically going through the back rows being like, which one of these guys can play in the second row? But I was surprised.
Yeah, I'm thinking it'll be Fee now. He's quite tall, you're lifting him. You're probably not lifting Dalton Papali'i in the line out. So that's what I can see happening.
I have a question on that one, actually. Mm-hmm. Given that, in the last couple of years, the last World Cup cycle anyway, we saw the ABs maybe getting overpowered in a way that didn't used to happen. And something that was remarked upon quite a lot, right, was that maybe the All Blacks have sacrificed a bit of size and maybe they need to get that back. That was the first thing that I thought of when I saw 3 locks. I was like, is he really changing his mindset there? Or maybe they are still going to go after this kind of skill-based, like maybe lighter players who are a bit quicker on their feet and can react a bit quicker. I don't know if that's reading too much into 3 locks.
No, I think it's definitely worth thinking about, and it was a question that I think many people have been asking, is what is Razor's game plan going to be, and what, how do we know what it's going to look like? Well, the first indication is the first squad, and we were talking earlier, it's been quite interesting. Razor's come out and talked about the selection process for this squad, and it's actually that each of the individual coaches have taken charge of a particular section of the team. So Jason Ryan, he selected the type 5. Scott Robertson, he picked the loosies. Leon McDonald, he picked the back 3, or the outside backs. So having the coaches come to the table and pitch their makeup, and then Razor kind of oversee that with, I guess, his ultimate game plan in mind, I think this is a pretty good indication. And if he's picking the loosies and he said, I want people who are good on both sides of the ball, that to me says your carrying better not come at the expense of your defense and at the expense of your work in the ruck. And that to me screams the pack's coming back, baby. The All Black pack, you are going to be fearing us. The fear factor will be back. That's what I'm hoping, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely seems like something it's hard to say that they need it, right? They made a World Cup final. They only just lost with 14 men. But if you grew up with like the aura of the 2011 and 2015 All Blacks teams, it does feel that they miss a bit, and they were missing a bit in that area, right? Between 2019 and the last World Cup.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But it'll be interesting to see. Maybe there's still room for Sotutu as we move through the year. Obviously, it's not a surprise when a Lucy gets injured. It's a pretty tough position. So I hope he stays on his game and is able to kind of take the feedback he hopefully gets from the coaches and use that as some motivation. 2 bolters that might just be worth talking about quickly. We've got George Bell, who's the Canterbury hooker. He's coming in because Samisoni Takiaho is injured. So there's probably likely to be a bolter, and it's him. And the other one is Posilio Torsi, who is the Hurricanes prop. I didn't see anyone talking about him. No one. And he is a big mammoth of a man, 6'5", 150 kgs in the front row. Does that put the fear of God on you?
It does. It's Winnie Antonio, isn't it? That school of prop. Like, it gives you such an extra string to your bow if you have a prop who can carry like a second row. Like, it's absolute. Is he like a skillful player as well?
Yeah, he made a really good, I think where he kind of burst onto the scene this year was in the Super Round when the Hurricanes played the Reds, and it was a really tight game. It went to golden point and he scored the match-winning try, just powered over the line. It was awesome. So really exciting for him. It sounds like he's built quite a great relationship with Jason Ryan already. And I think Razor said that it was love at first sight between Torsi and Jason Ryan. So I'm really actually excited to see that, a real genuine bolter. So yeah, that's kind of my assessment of the squad. Some unlucky names. Sean Stevenson. I imagine that might be the end for him with New Zealand rugby. He's been waiting around for his opportunities, played 1 test. I think he likely will be looking overseas, going to earn some money because time's kind of running out, unfortunately. Probably unlucky. Ruben Love, also unlucky. And then Braden Yosse, Peter Lakai, those Hurricanes Lucies, who I mentioned last week and I didn't make it, but that's okay. We'll, I'm sure we'll see them at some point soon. What was your kind of read of the squad?
Oh, just like depth everywhere. Like I saw in the reaction online, there's like Lakai and Yosse were both mentioned. Like there's a few people that a lot of fans felt were kind of hard done by, but I just think it's just a symptom of how many good players there are. Like things like the front row. Like I can't believe the amount of quality in the front row. Again, for an area that they were perceived as being weak in, kind of even a year before the World Cup, people were talking about you could get that All Blacks front row. Definitely doesn't look like that now. And it's deep as well. There's a bunch of really good players in there. It's interesting to see Perinara back. We'll talk about it later, but Ireland just lost their first choice scrum half.
Yeah.
You look at the depth chart and you're like, well, who do we bring in? The fact that New Zealand can lose Roygaard, who's the big up and comer, and then you're like, oh, we'll just get TJ. Like, it's ridiculous, the number of good players.
But TJ's story this season, I don't know if this has crossed your radar, because he's been out. He didn't play rugby for 450 days.
Wow.
He did his Achilles. They did an interview with him on Sky Sport at the naming, and he said, I didn't know if I'd play rugby again. So it's actually hugely special. I imagine he'll be leading the haka as well. So I expect to see a classic emotion-driven performance from TJ in the black jersey.
Yeah. Like Achilles, that's not good. Like my missus was on a surgery placement recently, and she saw a couple of attempted Achilles surgeries, and the surgeon, the way he described it to her, is it's like trying to do surgery on a wet sponge. It's like it's the hardest thing in the world to actually reshape it and to get it back where you need it. So for him to get back again, because he's not exactly young, is he?
No.
For him to get back again is incredible.
No, it's very impressive. So
I'm trying to think
yeah,
what else stood out. Oh, Proctor. A lot of hype around Proctor.
very excited for Billy Proctor. I think even if he doesn't start, I think him being in the team is only going to be good for Rico. I think them as training partners, him pushing him is going to be really good. Ratama, who's the other halfback, I'd say keep an eye out on. He's pretty impressive. I think he really came into form in the finals kind of series, not in the final, but in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And Caleb Clark, I think, being there in scintillating form. He's dropped a bunch of weight. He looks fast than ever.
Yeah, he looks brilliant. Like, I remember he was chunky before, and you've kind of, when you first see a player come on the scene, maybe you're like, oh, maybe that's just their body type, maybe that's just what they're like. But he looks lean. He looks ridiculous now.
Yeah, he came in the off season. It was actually, he did a really good interview with Rugby Pass, and he actually talked about a lot of the challenges he'd kind of faced around his relationship to the nutrition side of the game, and how he never, and his relationship, I guess, to his weight, and how that was a really complicated thing for him. And so he, this year, came in and was like, well, I've been getting the same results because I've not been doing anything different in terms of my prep, in terms of my work rate. And he's just gone and flipped the switch this year, and it's like a completely new player. So I'm really stoked for him. I'm hoping that this is the year he really cements himself in that setup.
Yeah, hat-trick in the super finals, not bad.
Not bad at all. And like, I don't know if you noticed, but that's been kind of I'm sure you probably noticed, his hallmark this year is his work rate. Like, he's at every ruck almost. He's all in up in there. He's not just hanging out on the wings. So that hard work has been rewarded by Razor, and I think he's a great asset for the game in New Zealand. He's a great personality as well. So I'm very pleased for Caleb Clark.
Yeah, it's something you're seeing a lot, I think, with top class wingers now. Like, there's a few that you can kind of handpick across different teams. Like, I mean, Colby and Aronson do it for South Africa. Pinot does it a lot for France. Faye Waboso, who's just burst into the England team and looks $1 million, he does it too. They're involved everywhere. Like, it doesn't matter where the play is. They don't just, as you say, stand out on the wing and wait for the ball and then hope for it. It really feels like you have to play as, I mean, it's so difficult now at test level, right? You've got to do all the defensive stuff that a wing has to do. And then when you have the ball, you basically also have to be a center. Like, you've got to pop up in the middle and you've got to try and find ways.
Maybe we need
to influence the game.
We need to change the name of a winger. It needs to be something else, because it doesn't encapsulate the role at all anymore, I don't think.
No. Like, winger is from the old days when, like, the tiny lads like me who were fast would just stand out on the wing and hope.
We'll put you out here.
Yeah. Hope to get the ball and that none of the fat guys can catch you. But yeah, really exciting. And you know what? This will annoy some England fans, but there are so many Kiwis that 2 of them are even playing for England.
There's just so many of us. Yeah, Chandler.
It's not quite true.
Not quite true. We'll say that Chandler Cunningham South was born in the UK, so you can have him. And I mean, not there's much room in the loose forward equation in New Zealand, but seemingly not much room in the loose forward equation for England either.
So much quality. So many good players.
But I particularly am excited by that kind of, I guess, Kiwi connection. Cunningham South, Ethan Roots, both battling for that number 6 jersey. Cunningham South was pretty present, I would say. I feel like I saw his hair all day in that game against Japan. I don't know. What do you reckon?
So my fiance is a Quins fan, so I've watched a lot of him at club level as well this season, and he's just he's so good. Like, they don't have another player, I think, who has the same balance of size, tackling ability, and carrying at the moment in the back row. Like, if you look at the other players they've got are brilliant. Like, Earl's an amazing 8, but he's a little bit on the small side for an 8, and he's more of like an evasive runner. Underhill, amazing in defense, amazing at the breakdown. I mean, he's a good carrier, but he's not known for like big lung busting runs or anything. And Cunningham South can do it all. And in him and Roots, they've got there's a big differentiation between those two players. Like, Cunningham South's like rock 'em, sock 'em, let's go out there and play. And Roots is much more like dark arts, grunts, kind of background work. So, I mean, I think they'll go with Cunningham South, but bringing Roots off the bench in a really tight game, you can definitely see how that could play into, especially a Borthwick game plan, like if you get a bit more conservative towards the end of the match. But yeah, some competition for places in that team at the moment.
Totally. I mean, Ben Earl is obviously a player we've heard so much about. He had a pretty impressive World Cup. He's been really upfront about his aspirations as a player. Like, he's been like, I want to be the best player in the world, which is, I think, refreshing. Like, of course you
Yeah.
do. You're really competitive. Put it out there in the universe. So I think many Kiwi fans are probably licking their lips at the prospect, depending on where Artie plays, of a Savia Ben Earl matchup at number 8. Do you think that's what we will see? Will Borthwick go with, I guess, the same 23 for the first test against the All Blacks?
Yeah, I think he pretty much said as much in the aftermath of the Japan game, that like, this is it. This is what he sees the first team as. And I mean, they looked in, especially for the first hour, they looked in pretty good nick against Japan. You know, like, Japan had some running early on in that game, but England never looked too stressed to me. Like, I think they knew the Japanese were going to come out of the blocks really fast. I kind of think it was part of the game plan to let them punch themselves out early on. There were a couple of instances where, you know, if a offload had been a little bit better, maybe Japan would have scored a try. But the fact that England then went and scored, well, 5 or 6 tries by 50 minutes, like, the power game was very evident. But also, their ability to open it up in attack is so much better now. Like, strike plays off lineouts and stuff that we weren't seeing a year ago. Yeah, they look like they're purring right now.
Yeah, I think for me, it felt like you could see the trust, you know, like in each other, but in what the coaches are putting forward for them and what they're trying to actually achieve. And I think that's, I guess, the difference between England G a year ago heading into those Fiji tests versus England now. So it's a scary prospect. I'm very nervous because I guess they're a bit more of a known quantity at the moment than the All Blacks are. Should we try and do a bit of like head to head? How things are shaping up?
Power rankings. Let's do it.
Power rankings. Okay. Well, I guess we start at the front.
Yes.
Front rows.
I think we both know how we feel here.
Yeah. I mean, it's All Blacks. It's All Blacks all day.
Yeah.
But they will benefit from having, I guess, Marla, Dan Cole there to kind of bring that experience. They were here on the last tour to New Zealand, so...
Yeah. The thing is like they've got this plan where they always have to have one of them on the field, right? So that the scrum stays up. But in New Zealand, I think you've got Lomax and De Groot, who are going to hold their own in the scrum and are just much, much better in the loose. So I think you have to give it to New Zealand in the front row.
I think so. And I think it's we spoke about it last week a little bit, like that's a pretty tight group, you know? Lomax, De Groot, Cody Taylor were starting pretty much all of last year. So they're well-oiled. There's, you know, that kind of chemistry, I guess, between them in the front row. I see them being very powerful. And then the bench is not bad either. So, yeah, front row, New Zealand.
Yeah.
Locks.
It's an interesting one because I think there's class on both sides. And the fact that the Kiwis have only picked 3 has kind of thrown me off a bit. That's tough.
3 and potentially like Paddy T. Yes, he was man of the match on Saturday, an inspirational performance, but like for people who aren't aware, he was ruled out with an MCL injury in the quarterfinals of Super Rugby. We were told 7 to 8 weeks he was out. And then somehow the Monday before the final, he came back and said, nah, I'm good to go. And he had an incredible performance. He looked like he was okay. He came off after 57 minutes, but you can't tell me he's not carrying some part of that injury still. So he'll have to be managed. So I think there's an air of fragility around the locking situation. You've got Barrett, who's great, we know. Tupuvai has had not enough time in the seat. He's been in the environment, but he's not really been a starter. So in my eyes, I think I see, you know, the Itoje, you know, he's a very much huge part of the England team and has been a really high performer for years. It just doesn't have that same level of fragile, I think, that the All Blacks team does. Yeah,
like, and George Martin, who plays alongside him in the second row, he's a worldie. Like, I think I'd probably give it to England just on the depth chart.
Yeah.
Although they lost Charlie Ewells.
He's not on the plane, is he?
No, he's gone home. Yeah. Well, because he's not going to play, is he? So they flew out. They did fly out a replacement. I can't remember who they called up off the top of my head. But it's got to be the first time that someone has played 2 consecutive games for a national team and been sent off in both of them. Like, how's your luck, you know?
Yeah, speak of card magnets, here we go. Jeepers.
Yeah. Oh, Nick Ezekwe replaced him. And, you know, Ezekwe's a good player, but he's not going to start. So, Itoje and Martin, I would think that's an area they'll look to get at the All Blacks.
Yeah, I think so. And it'll be set piece obviously going to be a huge battle anyway, but lineouts in particular so important with the increase in kind of the tactical kicking that we're seeing. So if they can get us there, that's going to be a big key, I reckon. All right, Lucy's the tough one.
Yeah, I think it's the hardest one to call.
We don't know. It's unknown for the All Blacks. Is Artie a
That's true.
7? Is he an 8? Finau at 6. He's looked good in Super, but he's like potentially one of those discipline is going to be tough for him. Satiti is in, but he's very new. Where are they wanting to play him? The names are there, the skills are there, but we just don't know what the makeup of that team is, that 3. Whereas it sounds like we know what it's going to be with England.
Yeah, with England, it's super settled. And they're good on both sides of the ball. I would say it's like the ceiling for that All Blacks group is probably higher. But especially with no warm-up game, I kind of fancy England to get the better of them, maybe, if it's a new combination for the All Blacks. Like we saw and we'll come on to it later, but we saw in the South Africa game against Wales, that rustiness can hurt you in matches.
Absolutely.
Even when you see it coming.
Totally. And I think it's been something we've struggled with often at the start of a season, let alone with a new coach. And I was thinking about it earlier, perhaps that is where having all of our players in Super Rugby is good, because you can have combinations that have existed throughout the season and had quite a bit of time together. So, if you played Geordie Barrett and Billy Proctor in the centres, that would be fine because they had a great season together. But thinking about those Lucies, it's quite an interesting makeup. There's not really, you could go Samipeni Finau and Luke Jacobson and Wallace Satiti are all from the Chiefs, so maybe you just start them and go, well, that's known. But Dalton Papali'i's from the Blues, Ardie Savea not even playing in the country, very interesting. I think I'd go England too. I'd go England too. Yeah, I'm being
9.
realistic.
Or what's Southern Hemisphere for 9?
It'll be TJ. Sure. I think it'll be TJ starting.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Be Mitchell starting for England.
Mitchell looked so good. Really good, I thought.
I'm a big fan. But TJ is an amazing, amazing player.
Yeah, he, in the semi-final against the Chiefs, he lost his head a little bit, which I didn't love. I was like, come on, you're like the leader pretty much of this team. You're such a veteran now. You don't need to have this kind of huge reaction to everything. But I guess it is also, like they call him, he's always like the second ref,
Yeah.
So I think if he can keep that side of things tamped down, then it will be a great season for TJ. I back Alex Mitchell, I think, over this, and particularly his pairing with Marcus Smith, potentially over a Petinata McKenzie pairing, which is quite a big unknown.
Okay, I'll buy that. Marcus Smith McKenzie is going to be some head-to-head, by the way. X-Factor everywhere.
I know. And Smith looked pretty good in that.
Yeah, he did.
And I thought, pretty calm.
Yeah.
Great try.
But, comparatively very easy opposition. They gave him a lot of space.
Yes.
And it'll be interesting to see how he copes with the All Blacks. Definitely won't give him that much rope.
No. But also, I guess on the other end of the stick, DMAC got completely kind of nullified, didn't he, in the Super Rugby final? Everyone's been putting up posters saying, where is Damian McKenzie? Missing.
I really felt for him. Like, he got no protection at all. Like, they clearly targeted him, and it felt like the Chiefs were just unable to stop it.
Yeah, and that was what we talked about last week, right? About this idea of him being flaky. And I talked about, I think, him being smaller and defenses targeting him, and then everything just shuts down because he's so central to everything because of the way he plays the game. So whether the Blues have given England any ideas, who knows?
I don't think Sam Underhill would have needed any second invitations to just go and try and smash him every opportunity he got. But no. I think we're going to see a fair bit of that from both teams, though, because Smith's not the biggest either. I'm always amazed at the heart levels he has, because everybody talks about him being flash, but he's constantly getting knocked down and picking himself up again. He never shirks the tackle. He might miss a few, but he never pulls out. He is a really brave player. And I assume the same of McKenzie. I haven't seen too much of him, but
courageous, definitely courageous, which is admirable. I could never. I would be like, no, get me out of here. It was interesting, actually, just side note, I guess in the press conferences, there were a lot of questions about the impact of the Blues and them having a more direct kind of Northern Hemisphere influence style of play, and whether that would impact the way that Razor utilized players and went in the kind of direction with the All Blacks. So I wonder, if maybe that blueprint for England is kind of there, I guess, from the Blues doing things to the Chiefs. Outside backs. No, we're not on outside backs. We'll have to edit that out. Inside backs. Inside backs. You guys had Slade and Lawrence. I said you guys. That was insulting.
You know what? I'm going to allow the mistake. I think New Zealand have this one. Like it's not. Lawrence and Slade are a really good pair of players, really good partnership. But like, if it's Jordy and Rico Ioane, like that's elite level.
Just two of, I think, rugby's best athletes in the middle of the park with full license to just crash, bash, like kick, do everything. I think they're a great pairing. It's got to be the All Blacks are winning this one, I think. Definitely midfield matchup. Unless Billy Proctor gets his first start, and I'd still say the All Blacks.
Even so, like, Geordie Barrett to me is just like, it's a big claim. Maybe the best all-round rugby player on the planet, certainly for a back. Like, when you think about all the different strings he has to his bow, like, he's massive, number one. He can carry really hard. His skills are amazing. He can kick also from distance. Second exit option, second receiver, like whatever you want, he can do it. I always love watching him play.
Yeah, and you'll get to see a whole lot more of him later this year, won't you? My goodness. Actually, on that note, though, I was listening to the breakdown, and Rico's on sabbatical next year. They haven't said where he's going.
Really?
But I don't think he'll go the Geordie route and do Europe. I feel like he might go Japan, but we shall see. We shall see.
Japan sounds like a nice blend of like, it's kind of a year off, so your body can recover a little bit. Like you come back fresh. Like how fresh did all those South African players look at the World Cup, having been in Japan the year before? I can definitely see the pull for a play. Plus, you make mega bucks, right? It's still really
mega bucks. Yeah, and it's not as far from home for Kiwis.
Yeah.
We're very isolated down here. Very isolated.
And the food, my God.
And the culture, just like such. And I don't know, seeing like Richie Mo'unga and Beauden Barrett when they were over there and getting to really immerse themselves in the culture. And it's very different, obviously, to being here. So, and Artie even said like that was half the draw card, was like getting away from New Zealand. Did you see him and Beauden Barrett playing club rugby in the last
I saw an interview with Artie where he's eating a sausage sandwich and the guy is trying to get him to say that he wants to be New Zealand captain, and he's so unbothered by the whole thing. There's like screaming children in the background. It was amazing.
It's the most New Zealand thing ever.
Yeah.
So good though. I think so good for rugby in the country that you can still potentially go and see an All Black just playing at your local club on the weekend.
Yeah. Someone messaged me about the Beauden Barrett one, being like, has a guy ever got being humble down better than Beauden Barrett has? Like, they're asking him all these questions. Like, you're an All Black, you're playing club rugby. And he's like, yeah, we'll see if I can still run. See if I can still make it. It's like, you're one of the best players in the world.
What the heck? He was on, there's a show here called The Crowd Goes Wild, which is like kind of a comedy-based sports show. And they interviewed him, and on the little ticker at the bottom, it's like, Beauden Barrett, coastal replacement back. Like,
yeah, so not funny. For the World Player of the Year.
No. So I guess on the note of Beauden Barrett, who is in the All Blacks squad, what are we thinking around these outside backs, power ranking England All Blacks?
Oh, I think the All Blacks, it's always an area of strength for them. Again, it's not that England don't have good options, because they do. But, Siva Reese being back, the form guys of Caleb Clark and Narawa. And you've got the experience of someone like Beauden Barrett. I think New Zealand definitely edge it there.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's All Blacks all day. I will stand in that. The day that I go against an All Blacks outside back call will be a dark day. I will say, though, I'm personally very excited to see Faye Boso on our shores. I feel like I've been following that little journey. He would fit in an All Blacks team. I'm not saying he'd make it, but he would do well in an All Blacks team. And so I'm very excited to see that matchup. If it's him versus Talia, my goodness.
Oh God, yeah. How did I forget Talia? The eel, the main man.
Eel. Slippery man. Slippery man.
God. So who do they start with?
Talia,
surely, right?
Yeah, it'll be Talia. I hate to say it. Feel free to edit this out if you want to. I'm not a fan of Sevu Reece because of things that he's done.
Mhm.
Everyone deserves second chances, but not everyone deserves to be an All Black. And the All Blacks have just done this big campaign around family harm. And so I think that's a poor choice to have that happening in your team. So I would not be naming him. I would expect it would be Blues backline, Caleb Clark, Mark Talia, Bodie at the back. That's what I think.
Yeah, I mean, they could do a lot worse.
They could do a lot worse.
All right. So that is the All Blacks in England.
Only took us a little minute.
Yeah, only took us half an hour. We will move on to part 2. So South Africa and Ireland. South Africa played Wales at the weekend. Ireland named their squad earlier in the week. Let's start with South Africa and Wales.
Yes.
What were your impressions of the game?
Clunky was the word that I would use, but not unsurprising. This was the first outing for the Springboks. It was also a Welsh team who are obviously facing all sorts at an all-time low in many ways. So I wasn't surprised that was kind of what we saw. How do you think, Hendrickse debut at 10? 10 is a spicy position at the moment for the Springboks. Is it just getting harder and harder for them to find that backup for Handré Pollard because of the noise around it at the moment?
I think so. I mean, I did a video about it at the weekend, upset some Springbok fans, because I think they felt I was being sort of overly negative about the performance. And I know they only had a little bit of time together. I know it's so difficult to just bring a group of players together, especially when everyone's playing all over the world, and then get a proper joined up performance. But it does feel like there's an awful lot of pressure on whoever steps into that 10 shirt. And Hendrickse, he missed that early kick, which is kind of a little bit of a harbinger, maybe this isn't going to be the best performance. But you could definitely see notes of them trying to open up the attack. And it's something that has been happening since Mali Libok came in the build-up to the World Cup when Pollard was injured. So interesting. Definitely too early to judge. Interesting. But I also thought just the dominance South Africa had in the first 15 minutes, to let the game slip from their control the way that they did, I thought that was very un-South African. Rust or not, that was a big surprise to me.
Totally. That kind of idea of normally the South Africans would see that as the opportunity to take the pain and make it worse.
Exactly.
This is going to be such a hard day for you. So whether that's, I guess for some players coming off the back of a very long season, or some players kind of kicking back in after being in Japan and just not quite clicking, that seems to be what it was. But that kind of never say die attitude felt a little bit like sometimes say die.
Yeah. I definitely agree. They definitely sorted it out in the second half. But again, they sort of return to what they do best, right? Big, brutal defense, big at the breakdown, kick to the corner, get yourself over the line. That's kind of what made the game safe for. I mean, the game was always safe, but that's what made the scoreline safe for them. It's also, I actually think, in fairness to them, the game was played. Wales were defending with a lot of intensity. They were working really hard, but they never really looked like creating anything. So the energy is really high. You're having to physically front up because they famously never go away, like Razzie says. But if you're South Africa, you've got to be thinking, there's no way this share are going to score against us. There's absolutely no way. So maybe it's a difficult, kind of difficult challenge to get your head around as a player.
Yeah.
It's frantic and it's frenetic, but you're not really in any danger. That's certainly how it looked from the outside anyway.
Yeah, that's probably quite, when you hear about a lot of mental skills coaches and things in sport, and they talk about, kind of that animalistic fight or flight and all sorts, but you're probably getting mixed messages from Wales. Mixed messages. And I guess you talked about opening up the attack and then, trying some things, and then in order to seal the victory, probably reverting to what is essentially habit for them now. As a Kiwi, we know that this was the first game for Tony Brown as a Springbok attack coach. He's known for, I guess, trickery and illusion and very creative plays. I felt like we maybe saw a little bit of that starting to come through, not necessarily executed to perfection, nor like a complete change up of the game plan or DNA of a South African performance. But did you feel like there was some little things that you were going, oh, that's Tony Brown?
Yeah, I definitely think we saw a bit of invention, didn't we? Lots of little short tip passes, just moving the ball really quickly. And I know South Africa have done that at times before, but as you say, you bring in someone like him, his job is definitely to bring an extra layer into the attack, right? That's why he's there. And Rome's not going to be built in a day. So you start with baby steps. But there were moments where, like, I thought South Africa could have kicked on and gotten 70, 80 in that game, honestly. Like, they were that dominant physically. And there were moments where they started to move the ball quickly and they got a couple of phases going and they looked ominous. Like, if that game plan comes together and that gels, scary times for everyone else.
Rusty's got a plan. And I hate seeing the, like, you know, you can see the little steps in the blueprint. Yeah. Oh, it looks so scary. It looks so scary.
Yeah, but I mean, they've looked. Oh, on that front, though, we're talking about the pressure that seemed to be on Hendricks' shoulders. Didn't see much weighing on Feinberg Nomazelu's shoulders. He looked so relaxed when he came on.
Clutch. To choose to take that penalty, it had the same energy as Damian Willemse in the scrum mark. Like, it was just kind of like, duh.
Yeah.
Very impressive.
Not a bad first involvement. And a really nice story too, because I saw his granddad was a big anti-apartheid activist who was exiled.
I heard that on the comms.
Yeah, exiled from South Africa, lived in London, and then you go and you make your first appearance in Twickenham just down the road and you kick a big goal like that. Like, because I saw his dad was live tweeting the game. Just the proudest dad of all time. It was so wholesome. It was lovely to watch. And it must have felt like, it must have felt like a huge, significant family moment for them. It was great to see.
Wow, very, very cool. You love when it comes a lovely little circle, doesn't it?
Yeah, and you just love to see people succeed, right? Like,
you wouldn't think it from some rugby fans, but we do.
Yeah, we do. It's true.
We do. Someone I was very eager to see succeed on the weekend, our guy Malcolm Marx, made his return. Yeah. What's kind of the assessment there? I think it was just kind of, you know, return from injury. He was there, and that was probably the win on the day.
Yeah, some very, very understandable ring rust, right? But for his perspective, how long did he play? 50, 55 minutes, maybe something like that? Seemed to come through it with no injury. For him, that's huge success, right? Like, just getting miles in at this point, and not getting hurt again, because God, they've missed him.
Oh, I missed him. I missed him.
The other players to pick out, Evan Ruiz in at 8. Very bright start to the game. Like, one lung buster right at the beginning where he almost got himself over for like a 40-meter try. And very interestingly for him, Cameron Hannacombe had to go off in the URC final.
Yes.
So I wonder, does that mean we're likely to see Ruiz against Ireland wearing the 8 jersey?
Big. Huge.
Or, I mean, because they've got plenty of back rows. They could just shift someone else over there. Like, I think Quagga can play 8 as well, can't he? But
well, you know, Vermeulen's in the coaching box, so like if worst came to worst.
Do you want to get your kit on?
Yeah, surely he wouldn't mind, I'm sure.
And then you can't let any discussion of this game go by without Edwill van der Merwe.
Another really wing in a scrum cap. Just doing wing in a scrum cap things.
Really good game. All round as well. Like, the double tackle that was a shambles, by the way. The ref, did you see that passage of play? The ref put his arm up.
Yeah.
It looks like he's given advantage, and then there's an intercept, and then he's like, no, we're fine. Keep playing. But just brilliant from Edwill.
Well, that's playing what's in front of you as well, right? And that's like rugby IQ that you want to be seeing from your young players to be able to play the refs. So overall, player of the match, wasn't he, as well? So
and I think
couldn't ask for much better.
Yeah. So from South Africa, that neatly brings us on to their opponents, Ireland. Actually, quickly on Van der Merwe, if Colby is out, I mean, they've got Mapimpi as well, but is Van der Merwe a shout? Could he start?
I think so. When has Rusty ever shied away from throwing someone to the absolute wolves?
That's certainly true.
You know, like, what better way?
Yeah, what better way to test him, right?
Yeah.
So Ireland squad, really mixed reaction to this one online anyway. But there's like one big news story, obviously, which is Jameson Gibson Park is unavailable.
the best halfback in the world.
Oh, it's such a big loss for us. Like, he's such an important part of what makes our attack tick. It's such a shame. But the flip side of that, obviously, is it's a chance for someone to get like really high quality minutes that they definitely wouldn't have gotten otherwise. And it's a chance for someone to step up. And the someone probably is going to be Craig Casey.
Okay.
Munster scrum half. Him and Crowley obviously play together every week at provincial level. So we will have that partnership, that connection. But I think, and it's no shade to Casey, it's just the level that Gibson Park has gotten to. It is a big step down, right? Like, Casey's going to have to, he's got some large, small boots to fill because it is scrum house we're talking about. But yeah, that was really disappointing to see. But otherwise, pretty much the standard fare you would expect from an Ireland squad. We did have one bolter. I'm not sure how aware Southern Hemisphere is of Cormac Isachukwu.
No.
Right. So he
Tell
plays
me,
for.
What do I need to know?
He plays for Ulster. Yeah, he plays for Ulster. Second row /6. Really big man. Really skillful. Good carrier. You know, the one place we're not lacking it at the moment is like back rows. But another player who's going to bring like decent competition in there, and I wonder, like, maybe they'll give him a try just because the combination of his size and pace is something we don't produce very often. We don't have that many players like that. Ryan Baird, been an ever-present in the Leinster team, but maybe hasn't been at his best form. Made a couple of really big mistakes in the URC semi-final against the Bulls. So I do wonder if they'll risk having a go with Isachukwu for one of the tests to just kind of surprise the Springboks as well.
So throw it out there, Russie. You're not the only one with a few surprises up your sleeve.
Well, exactly. But that isn't very typical Andy Farrell. Like, the Farrell's much more like, you get what you expect, and he doesn't mind showing his hand because, you know, we back ourselves, that kind of thing. But yeah, seeing Gibson Park missing has made me a lot less hopeful for results on the tour. You know, I always thought best case scenario is you win one of the two games because it's so hard to win at Loftus. But Glasgow did it at the weekend, so.
Is it? Maybe you need to get Jamison Gibson Park to Patrick Tuipulotu's doctor. That might be the key. Well,
believe me, I think they will have sent him to everyone they possibly could have.
Surely.
But
that,
you know,
headline.
Yeah, but there is always a criticism that you get from Ireland fans, which is like they play the same players too often. They don't get enough minutes into people who've been on the fringes, and people don't really get an opportunity in the same way that they do in other teams. Like, you look at that All Black squad, so many new caps, so many players who are sort of haven't played that many games for the All Blacks anyway, who are going to get their opportunity this summer. Even England have sprinkled in a few. For Ireland, it definitely feels that if there were more super talented youngsters coming off the rank, we'd have a few more of them in the squad. But I'm just not sure where people would go. Players like John.
So interesting in the wake of, well, it sounds like you're saying that there maybe isn't even the player base there. But I guess in the wake of the World Cup, that was the big story of the Ireland defeat that I heard anyway down here, was Andy Farrell like tired out his team, made them play the whole World Cup. All these other players didn't get a chance, and now there's no depth. Johnny Sexton's gone. What do we do? And so I thought that was going to be the big lesson, particularly when your coach is continuing on, right? So if this maybe would have been a good opportunity for that, but it's so much rivalry at stake.
Yeah, and I think, like we said, his brand is continuity, right? He trusts you and he sticks with you once he trusts you. But like, there were definitely eyebrows raised. Like, Jacob Stockdale is back in the squad. You know, he hasn't been really in and around the Ireland team for quite a long time. And again, if we had really exciting young wingers pulling up trees, I think they'd be in there ahead of him. But, you know, you pick from what is available. There are definitely some Munster players who I think, like Mike Haley, who plays fullback for Munster. You know, Ireland have a bit of a crisis at 15 now with Keenan gone to the sevens.
Yes.
They've got Frawley and Jimmy O'Brien in the squad who can both play 15, but I think Frawley's in there as cover for 10s. That leaves Jimmy O'Brien on his own, and he did not have a good day against the Bulls at 15. He's a winger, really. So he's still learning the position. South Africa's not a team you want to be learning the position against. And Mike Haley's a guy who's got so many games under his belt at 15, very reliable under the high ball. So I think if anyone could feel hard done by not getting in, it's probably him. John Hodnett as well has been brilliant for Munster, but there's no selection that they could have made where you think, oh, that's transformative. That's a guy I really, really, really want to see. So we're in a strange position at the moment, which is it's the best team we've ever had, the most successful team we've ever had by a distance. Talent levels off the charts, and you still look at it and you think, where's this group going to be in 2 years, 3 years? You know,
It's interesting to hear that kind of lethargy around it in a way, because the way Irish rugby was talked about, at least in these parts over the last 2 years, it was the second coming. It was the 2015 All Blacks all over again. You know, that Andy Farrell was leading the charge in many ways, and he still is in many ways, but just in terms of not being able to quite get that feeling around the team that this is a team where you can see the next steps and the lineage and the succession is a bit of a, I don't want to say failing because nothing's played out yet, but that just seems like a shortcoming to not be able to bring your fans on that kind of story.
Well, I wonder if some of it is just that our expectations as a fan base are now way too high, because like, yes, we went out in the quarters again at the World Cup. It was a bit different, right? We pushed a really good All Blacks team right to the last minute. We then went and won this. God, I can't even talk. Went and won the Six Nations. We were 30 seconds away from a double Grand Slam, which has never been done before. The Irish teams made the semis of the URC. Yes, they lost in, well, Leinster losing at the Bulls, you'd expect, but Munster losing at home to Glasgow was a bit of a surprise. Glasgow did go on and win the thing, so I think that puts it in context. Leinster got to a final of the Champions Cup. They only lost to Toulouse, but there somehow still seems to be like quite a big cloud of negativity around it. Like, I think it's just because we've got this reputation of never quite getting over the line when we should. Like, if we go and lose 2 tests in South Africa, I think there'll be quite a lot of toxicity around it. I think there'll be a lot of negativity around the team.
It reminds me so much of being an All Blacks fan post 2007. Like, you know, similar thing. You had all the accolades, all of them, you know, and it still was just this huge thing hanging over, and no one would be satisfied until that was dealt with. The Rugby World Cup was dealt with, because it felt like you should and you haven't. So yeah, just that toxic kind of endless debate, everyone knowing better, apparently, the armchairs, the what ifs, the should have done.
Yeah, the people like us.
Yeah, us? No, not us though, because we're always right, remember? Oh yeah, that negativity. It's. I feel like maybe, is it because it's been such a long time coming, and maybe some real moments of excitement like the World Cup and things? It's almost like a bit of a hangover. You know, I don't get the feeling that everyone's super excited for this all of a sudden. Maybe it feels like, oh God, I'm a bit scared.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what it is. Like, I mean, with the All Blacks, the thing is, with the All Blacks, you earned that level of, sorry about that. With the All Blacks, you learned that level of expectation, right? Like, you were the best team in the world for a long time and didn't win a World Cup. It was insane that it went on for that long. I do think a lot of it for Ireland is the hype. Because, you know, we had an amazing team going into 2023. We could have won that World Cup. There's no question about it. We were good enough. But if you're honest, that's probably the first time we've gone into a World Cup. You've looked at the team and you think that team's good enough to go and win it. Like, maybe 2019. But again, the peak of our bounce was like a year before 2019. By the time we got into the tournament, we weren't looking so hot. So there's definitely a lot of expectation that has sort of spilled over into people being like, well, why can't this team win? But I do think we should remember our place on the world stage. Like, it took us a long time to get to that point where we really were competitive. And I know we've hyped up generations before, like back in the O'Driscoll days and stuff like that. But like, I have people saying to me on TikTok sometimes, you know, oh, the World Cup's the only thing that matters. Like, I was talking to someone about Joe Schmidt the other day. They were like, yeah, but he never won a World Cup. It's like, we are talking about Ireland, you know, bit of realism.
Yeah, well, that was actually interesting into that clip we posted. So many people in my comments were like, and this was in response to a video about this rivalry between Ireland and South Africa. And people said, we're not even rivals with Ireland. Like, don't be silly. Like, they don't deserve to be our rivals. And I was going, oh, to me, it seems very clear. But maybe in the scheme of a long rugby history, that contention of like new era versus history, causing some, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, kind of mental kind of struggles around a bit of dissonance, perhaps.
Yeah, I think so. And you saw it when Ireland went out. A lot of the reaction was sort of like, well, you know, finally someone's put that team back in their box. Because I think a lot of particularly Southern Hemisphere fans and pundits felt that like we were overhyped. And, all of the old memes about we always peak between World Cups and all that kind of stuff, that all applies as well. So it'll be interesting because, I don't think you should read too much into a summer tour ever. Ideally, you'd approach it the way the Springboks look like they're going to approach it, where they're going to try out different players. Obviously, there's a balance. You still have to try and win the game. But basically, more questions than answers at this point.
That is so interesting because I feel like if you asked a Kiwi about these tours, it's like, and I saw it in the reaction to the videos around like France sending not their A team. Many people were saying so many people were saying, oh, it's just a tour. It's just a test match. It's not the World Cup. It's just test matches. In my head, test matches, winning percentage, every single game, every single tour is so important. It's all on par. So I've been reckoning with the fact recently that not everyone thinks that way. And that's okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really not. Rusty, maybe, he's onto something and New Zealand haven't caught on.
Well, I'm in two minds because I do think it is really interesting. But how many test matches do you get a year as an international coach? Like 10, 12?
14?
Yeah. Like maybe you guys get a few more in the... Do you get more out of the Rugby Championship? I'm not going to do the maths in my head now.
6 games.
Yeah, 6 nations, you get 5. And then you've got summer matches and you've got November, right? So it's not that many games. So you've got to use those matches to try new players, to try stuff out, to get your plan in shape. But, if you're not winning the vast majority of those matches, it's not going to feel very good coming around to World Cup time.
Just ask Ian Foster.
Yeah, exactly.
And he technically still won the majority.
Yeah. But I guess it's fine margins, right? And
getting finer by the year.
Yeah, it certainly feels that way. But
circling back to Ireland.
Yes. Circling back to Ireland, I do hope we see some tricks up their sleeve for the Boks, because I think the Boks will certainly have some for us. And I can't believe I'm saying it, but I do think we need to get the feel-good factor back in a little bit. Even though we won the Six Nations, it seems mad, but that's the way it is.
Gosh, people move so quickly, don't they? Public opinion moves so quickly, especially if you're spending too much time on Twitter. I can't keep up.
But also, just if everyone's used to you winning all your matches, losing to England the way they did, I think was a big gut punch for people following the big gut punch of the World Cup. Maybe there's just a bit of fatigue. For people feeling their hopes were raised and then dashed. But yeah, I mean, it's all waffle at this point. The game's starting in a couple of weeks and then we'll really see.
It's alarmingly close. So if we've talked about the Ireland squad, there's been one other squad announcement, which takes us to the third edition of these tests. The Wallabies, Joe Schmidt, he said, "This is my squad, hear me roar." What kind of stuck out to you? Was there anything really notable in the first read of the squad?
Yeah, I mean, Curtly Beale back. The first thing that stood out to me was the balance of youth and experience seemed much more kind of considered than the Eddie Jones squad. And that's even with no overseas players, like a bunch of restrictions on the group. You could still see like there's Nick White and there's Curtly Beale in the backs to kind of help bring those young lads along. And they looked sorely lacking in leadership, right, in playmaking roles during the World Cup. So yeah, my first thought was like lessons learned, definitely. They've done an internal review and they know what the problems were. And they're looking ahead. And I looked at it and I thought, like, this is quite exciting. Like, I actually really want to see this team in action.
Yeah, I agree. I think the first run out, there'll be many people with all eyes on that game. I think the other thing was that only 14 players who actually make the cut from the World Cup, I guess, last year. So less than half. Do you think that allows for the group of the Wallabies, the brand of the Wallabies, to move on from the World Cup like effectively and maybe quite quickly?
Well, that's what they're hoping, right? I think as long as they win, yes.
Yes.
Although I wonder if even winning is what it's about. I think as long as they put in like an Aussie performance, as long as there's some attacking rugby, as long as it looks like the team's moving in the right direction, I reckon people will have quite a lot of road for them at the beginning. Just because it was so bad at the World Cup. So, yeah.
Like a carcass. It was horrific.
Yeah.
Awful.
Oh,
sorry. You go.
Yeah, notable absences. One of my favorite players is Will Skelton. So I definitely going to beat the drum. Him not being there, I understand why they don't want overseas players. You need a break. It's so much travel. They probably want to start attracting those guys back to Australia anyway, if they can. But no Skelton definitely feels like a massive hole.
Yeah, huge. And talking of attacking rugby, Corin Betty not there either.
Yeah.
I know he's kind of getting on a little bit, but he's an icon. And then Nwanga Nitawase obviously not in there because he's going to league. Same with Carter Gordon. So I applaud Joe Schmidt for kind of standing quite strong on his principles there and backing the players who are in the country, which has seen some people rewarded. One I thought was really interesting was Tom Liner, whose brother plays for Italy, but his dad obviously won the World Cup with Australia in 99. So that's a nice little, again, a full circle, lovely story.
Some great rugby genes there.
Yeah. And we were talking about Alex Hodgman before.
Yes.
So he is a front rower. He played one test for the All Blacks in 2020. And then obviously now due to the eligibility rules through World Rugby is eligible for Australia. But lesser known, he also played under 20s for Fiji. So that man is a triple international. Excited to see, I guess, whether he makes the starting team or running on off the bench and how that goes. Was there any other names you were like, ooh, that's interesting?
Harry Wilson back in. I know a lot of people wanted to see him in at the World Cup, so offense mended there. And great to see Alan Alatoa back as well. I think they really missed him. But also, some of the names that are missing through injury, definitely conspicuous by their absence, like Jorgensen, Bell, Leota, Parecki, all unavailable. So I think he definitely would have liked to have been able to call on some of them.
Oh, definitely. Angus Bell in particular. My goodness, what a player.
Yeah, what a player is right. And actually, it's interesting to see, we talked about this before, but Noah Lolosio looks like he's getting the keys at 10.
Yeah.
Will be well interesting. Earned. Yeah, definitely well earned. One of those guys who reinvigorated his career by going abroad, right? Little short-term stint in France, and seems like he came back a new player.
Maybe that's a good motto for life. Don't we all just need a short stint in France?
Maybe.
I'm going to tell my boss that. I just need a short stint. Yeah, I was looking at the makeup as well. So we've got 10 Brumbies, 7 Rebels, 13 Reds, making up the majority, 5 Force, only 3 Waratahs. So dire season for the Waratahs in many ways. But that's kind of the makeup as I see it at the moment.
Yeah, but it feels like good balance.
Yeah.
Feels like good vibes, right?
Good vibes.
Feels like the players are feeling good about it, which is in contrast to their opponents.
Yes. Oh.
I mean, I'm always like a little bit hesitant talking about this kind of stuff. We discussed like, should we talk about it? But there's a big controversy going on behind the scenes with Sam Parry, and without getting too into the weeds, right, into too many details, clearly not all is right in the Welsh camp, and Gatland doesn't seem to have his story quite straight about what happened. Alex Parry is very clear about what he thinks happened. Is it him that's coming out and talking, or is someone speaking on his behalf?
I think someone's speaking on his behalf, which I imagine has got Gatland probably a bit racked up. You saw Gatland saying, I wish Parry had come and spoken to me about it. Just for context, so Parry left the Welsh squad saying that essentially he's been promises haven't been delivered on. He thought he was there in a kind of full playing capacity. Turns out he was there kind of to help prep the team, and that was a miscommunication, and he's not feeling valued, so he left the camp. Gatland said, why won't you, I would have appreciated if he had come and spoken to me about it, but I think maybe that points to the issue that if your player doesn't feel they can come and talk to you about it, then something must be going a little bit wrong. And, there were certainly some positives on the field, but when things like this are happening off the field, they can just overshadow and then kind of fester and things go from bad to worse.
Yeah. I mean, I think the conversation around Wales is so interesting because I think sometimes things can get so bad that like pundits and people in the media, it gets to a point where they don't want to criticize anymore because you don't want to throw people under the bus. You don't want to shine a light on it. Like if you look at since the World Cup, they've had real trouble selecting enough players, right? It seems like they have real trouble with depth. They keep trying out new players. They've had loads of injuries. Like I always feel when this is not an attempt to criticize the team and be like, oh, Wales are crap. Like it's to talk about the direness of the situation that they've got, which it seems like there aren't enough players for them to call on. Gatland and the way the team plays just feels outdated. Like during the Six Nations, they were carrying from everywhere. They were losing every game massively, carrying from everywhere. They won good half against Scotland, where it felt like Scotland really took their foot off the gas because they thought they'd won the game. And there's no attack to speak of. Doesn't really seem to be a kicking strategy to speak of. Doesn't really seem to be an identity to speak of, other than we work really, really hard. We always put the graft in. And they did that again at the weekend. Like, they kept themselves in that game through sheer just force of will, just bloody mindedness, hard yards, hard tackles, never ever giving up, never giving an inch. But how long can you ask players to do that for when there's nothing happens when they get the ball back? You know, I really wonder, like, what the motivation levels are like, and what those players inside, when they look ahead to the future, like, what do they see? Like, I mean, you don't want to be just a content creator who's out there being like, oh, it's terrible, when, you know, you don't know the nuances of what's going on inside. But God, it looks like a difficult situation.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a where there's smoke, there's fire, you know? Do we know the ins and outs? Not necessarily. Can we comment on them? Yeah, with the nuance it requires, potentially not. But something is not going well, and, you know, it's been well documented that things at the kind of administrative level are very dire. And so, as you know, New Zealand Rugby's had its own administrative little crisis recently that we're still kind of waiting to see the impact of. But this is kind of a story. The Welsh story is quite sad of when things start to go wrong administratively. It does have a huge impact on the game and these players, their employees. So I feel like, 8 months ago, you know, after the World Cup, Wales going to Australia, you know, Wales made the quarters. Australia didn't even make it out of their groups. This
and Wales
tour
smashed them in the group as well. Like,
Wales would have been licking their lips about this tour 8 months ago. And now I feel like if I were a Welsh player getting on that plane, I'd be dreading it.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's just so hard to see where the good news stories come from. I'd love to be a fly on the
wall. Like.
Well, look, he's always going to bring what he brings, right? Like, I did see one person saying on Twitter they were looking for positives for the Welsh performance. He definitely got the better of Marks. I know Marks was rusty and you know, had been out for a while, but that famous picture where Marks is pointing at him, being like, I'm coming for you. I think Dowie Lake definitely won the next round of that, which he'll probably feel really good about. Mason Grady, maybe not a 12, but really physical, really quick. Definitely looks like someone you could potentially start to build an attack around, but definitely few and far between the sunlight, the rays of sunlight, I should say.
I don't even know what else to say about it. It's just really sad.
Yeah. No, look, we won't beat a dead horse. Just a quick recap, because we're almost at time, but a quick recap on the two finals, because like we said, it was a proper festival of rugby. So do you want to start with the... Sorry,
that's not even including the Barbarians, which is wild.
Oh God, yeah, I didn't even see that. It was so difficult
me either. I had to cut it.
But looking at that Fiji team and that Barbarians team, just the amount of class players on the field. Where was that game?
Twickenham. It was after the South Africa game. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Jeez, that's some double header.
Quite wild. Sam Whitelock's last game ever.
Yeah.
Sad.
Oh, this has to happen. Did you see, by the way, in their own words, the end of the final episode where he's talking about when he got back into the changing room after the World Cup final and he just didn't want to take the jersey off? That was heartbreaking.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you had watched that, actually. It was funny kind of watching the narrative similarities to what you saw in Chasing the Sun. You know, Chasing the Sun, they really were like, this is so much more than rugby. You know, you think you're under pressure, think about people who have lost their jobs or whatever. And then New Zealand kind of coming through with the narrative around the floods and all of that. It was interesting to see some similarities. And hear from players in ways I think most people haven't heard from All Blacks, even though it was still quite highly sanitized.
Yeah, it definitely didn't feel as raw as Chasing the Sun, right? But I mean, it kind of suits the Kiwi national character, though. Stoicism is such a big thing for you guys, it feels like particularly the All Blacks. You know, saying less and being less expressive definitely seems a bit more on brand. Yeah,
well then, on the other hand, then I would recommend, Razor's been doing this series, there's only 2 parts out on Sky Sport. I think it's on YouTube. It's like called Razor, but it's the complete opposite. It's
really,
he's so forthcoming. He's really Yeah, genuine, which I think is kind of the thing that everyone loves about him. So I'd maybe recommend that for a bit more of an insight, I guess, into perhaps where things are heading. He's just such a like people person. You can tell that that's at the very center of everything he does. But Razor, Crusaders didn't win Super Rugby. Super Rugby did have a final. Did you like that link? That was
effortless segue.
We had the final of Super Rugby on the weekend. The Blues taking on the Chiefs. The Battle of the Bombay Hills. It almost felt like a Chiefs home final in many ways, just because, I mean, I don't know if you know, but where the Chiefs are from and then Auckland, they're an hour apart. So heaps of Chiefs fans were at Eden Park. Horrible weather.
Yeah, it looked awful.
Awful, man. It was cold. But it suited, like the Blues would have been so happy because it suited their game plan so well. And they just completely annihilated the Chiefs. They didn't have an answer. 41-10 in the final is a wild scoreline. 3 tries to Caleb Clark. AJ Lamb was amazing. Sotutu was amazing. Both the Ioane brothers, Akela's last game. Ricky Riccatelli was pretty good. Yeah, I thought it was a great game for the Blues. Maybe not a great game for a final, but a good season Super Rugby also. What did you make of it?
Well, so following Super from afar, it definitely seems like the Blues have been the best team probably throughout the season, right? Maybe between them and the Hurricanes.
The Blues, yeah.
But given the Hurricanes didn't make the final, it definitely seems like the Blues deserved on the season basis and definitely on the basis of the game. Like they were all over them. I was really struck by how good their handling skills were in that weather. Like very few drop balls. Yeah.
And the desire to still, I guess, kick it, take those lineouts, set piece. Harry Plummer was very impressive, quite a tactical masterclass in many ways.
Was he anywhere near All Black selection? Because he looked very good on Saturday.
I think he would have been in the conversation. He didn't make it. The Blues social media not happy about it. Definitely the conversation ramped up after Saturday, but I think in all honesty, I imagine the team wouldn't have been impacted by the final too much unless someone, I don't know, got a red card and was going to be banned. I think that team was on paper anyway. But he was like a backup and he usually played 12, but he came into cover 10 because he played 10 and 12, but he covered 10 because Peter Feta was injured, Zahn Sullivan was injured, Bowden Barrett wasn't there. And so he came in and just kind of made the position his own. So it's been a great season and a real rise for Harry Plummer. So I imagine next year there might be more, or even in the squad of 36 for the Rugby Championship. So we shall see.
Yeah, he looks a player. And then on the other side of the world, later in the day, we had another final. This one didn't go the way probably most people expected it to go. Amazing stuff from Glasgow.
I was very impressed.
Maybe a bit of a watershed moment for them and for Scotland because the core of that national team is in that Glasgow team. And it just felt like such a big statement win. I will say, I think cold light of day, the Bulls are going to look back on that one and it's going to take them a while to get over that because the game was there for them.
That was going to be my question did Glasgow won it, obviously, particularly with that second half performance, but part of it, the Blues are going to be like, we let that slip right through our hands.
Yeah, I think so. I think they really missed Billy LaRue. A bit of a calm head just to direct people. And, against Leinster in the semis, he was like quarterbacking. You could see he was telling everyone where to be. He was dictating the flow of the game. And the strategy would have been different against Glasgow, but definitely that experienced head, it felt like they were missing it.
Yeah, and when the score is based on 3 tries to 1, like that's pretty convincing in the end, really. So all credit to Glasgow. I didn't realise we had a Kiwi hanging around there, Josh Mackay.
Is he Kiwi? I thought he was Australian.
Yeah. He played under 20s for us and he used to play for the Highlanders. I thought he was really good. I'd never seen him.
He was excellent. The whole back 3 was brilliant for Glasgow. That Cancellieri, the Argentinian, he looks a really, really tidy player as well.
Yeah, no, it was a great performance. And do you think it means a little bit more that they got it done at Loftus?
Definitely. Scotland are always the hype team that don't beat the big teams. Glasgow, they probably don't have the same label because they did win a Pro 12 back when they had Finn Russell back in the day, but they're always fancied and then they never quite seem to pull it together at the end of the season. And people were already talking about it because in the league part of the competition, their form definitely seemed to be dropping off a little bit. They didn't look quite as as dominant as they looked earlier in the year. But I mean, what a performance. My favorite moment of the game was Jack Dempsey when I know the try got chalked off, but the one where Aronson got tackled before he caught it, and then Dempsey had to sprint like 15 minutes, put down the try, and then he literally just flopped on the floor. Like you can see there was absolutely zero energy left. And I can't imagine how that felt, having to stand up and realize it's going to get chalked off. That must have been gutting. But he had some game. He was brilliant, especially in that second half.
Totally. Yeah, no, it was, and I mean, the finish, that was wild, tense in front of that crowd. Hype was unreal. You can see, again, as having watched, that was my first URC game for the season, but just the competition seems to be in a very healthy place looking from afar.
Yeah. I mean, it's great to see over the 3 years a South African winner, an Irish winner, and a Scottish winner, right? Like that certainly looks healthy. And there are problems during the season. The travel is difficult, and sometimes you get washouts because teams don't want to send first teams and all that kind of stuff. But overall, you know, you can't let perfect be the enemy of good in situations like this. And the fact that it's like a 2-continent tournament, they're going pretty well.
Something I've seen people talking about in the wake of this game is kind of, obviously Duhan van der Merwe is the great god of Scottish wingers, but Carl Steyn was unreal.
Yeah. And, you know, Duhan's the guy that everyone's like, oh, if he's on fire, Scotland will win. He's not the guy. Tuipulotu is the guy. He's the center of their team. Like, what a player. And, God, obviously, Tuipulotu starts at 12 for them. Who do they pick on the wing the next time they have a big international game? It's also such a shame that they don't have a big summer tour. Because off the back of that, you'd love to see these guys go out and play South Africa or New Zealand or whatever.
I was looking because I was like, we never really see the All Blacks play Scotland. And I think that would be such an interesting matchup. And I would love for them to come and do a tour here. So whoever's booking the tours, except we know that it's not happening next year nor the year after. So
yeah.
But I would love to see a Scotland-New Zealand matchup because I don't think we've played them even on a Northern tour for a couple of years. So like in this kind of Finn Russell era of fun, innovative Scottish rugby, you know, we haven't seen that kind of matchup. So I'd love to see that.
You played them in the last World Cup cycle. I feel like it's a while ago, but they almost won. It was the most Scottish performance ever. They played really, really well, and they just kind of fell at the last hurdle. I think actually they let New Zealand get too far ahead, and they made a bit of a comeback. I don't remember the game that well though, but yeah, I would love to see more of it too.
It was 2022. New Zealand won 31-23, and then before that it was 2017. So it's just too long between drinks for my liking. Personally.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you there. So, marathon weekend of rugby, but we made it through, and there's loads more to come. We have a special announcement, special guest on Wednesday.
Yes, very exciting. This Wednesday, we are interviewing, putting the tough questions to none other than probably the world's best referee, Ben O'Keefe. Very generous in sharing his time with us. I think for us, we really wanted to talk to him about these upcoming law changes that have come from the Shape of the Game forum earlier in the year and how he sees that impacting the game, and maybe dispel some myths that we see making their way around online around these rules, the purpose of them, what they will mean for scrums, etc. So very exciting. Make sure to tune in. If you have any questions, feel free to contact either of us and let us know.
Yeah. Drop any questions in the comments. Anything you want to ask Ben, please try and keep them civil. I feel like there's probably no rugby referee in the world that doesn't have at least one fan base that thinks they're dead set against them. But really excited to talk to him and get his insights. And then, just when you thought maybe there was a breather week, no, the Under-20s World Championship is on at the weekend. So plenty of rugby to watch. I'm pretty sure you can watch it all for free online. So if you do need rugby fix, I'd say that's a good place to start. But for now, that's it from us.
Like, subscribe, do all the things down below, share with your friends, tell everyone. That's my advice. Please do that. Thank you very much.
See you next time.